Did you know that St. Luke's University Health Network, based in the Lehigh Valley, Pennsylvania, has been recognized by the U.S. government as the highest performing health system in the United States for quality? You heard right. St. Luke's #1 recognition affirms our status as the top leader among the most respected healthcare providers in the nation, including Houston Methodist and the Mayo Clinic. To state it simply, if you want to receive the best care when you go to a hospital, come to St. Luke's.
This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg,
essayist and commentator Eric Lavine,
and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party, as well as being the County Chair of the Suffolk County Republican Party. With us is our co-host, Eric Lavine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, and I am Judge Richard Weinberg. I want to start off by congratulating our friend Jesse on the graduation of his son from college. Congratulations, Jesse.
It was last week. He's a graduate of the Citadel in South Carolina and now going on to his master's.
Fantastic. So,
congratulations. Obviously, he gets his brains from his mother.
Well, listen, as my daughters get their brains from their mother, it's the way it works.
Hopefully his looks as well.
No.
Yes, exactly.
Listen, you guys are strikingly handsome. I saw your pictures in the New York Post ad for WABC. I can give you an affidavit that you're both very handsome gentlemen. All right. So, as we're taping here on Friday, the 15th of May, Trump is in the process of winding down his China summit with Xi. So let me give you my thoughts and my concerns. You know, I know Trump is a businessman. I know he likes to make business deals. He brought along this enclave of business leaders, very impressive group, and they were talking deals. That's swell. That's nice. Deals are nice. But there are more important issues as far as I'm concerned in terms of our relationship with China. China opened the gambit by saying everything has to do about Taiwan. Let me make it as simple as possible because there are rumors that Trump is going to slow down or even limit the sale of arms to Taiwan. You can't do that because you send a signal of weakness, and that will only embolden the Chinese to make a move against Taiwan or to set up more islands or put more incursions in the territorial waters around Vietnam and Thailand and Australia. Bad idea, President Trump. Don't play that. Just because you want a deal, do not relent at all on sales to Taiwan. We need Taiwan. That is, the United States needs it. They control 90% of the chips. We need those chips. If they take over, that is, the Chinese take over Taiwan, we're in serious trouble. They can send us back into the dark ages. Do not be foolish because you want to make business deals. Now, second point of my comment, then I'll turn it over to Eric and Jesse. The reason I'm unhappy about talking about trade deals is as follows. Our enemy, not a competitor, our enemy is China. They have hegemonic ambitions for that region of the world in Asia. They have hegemonic ambitions about becoming the #1 world power. They are people who are responsible for sending COVID into our country, fentanyl into our country, setting up police stations in our territory, buying land near military bases, having secret labs across our country where they're experimenting with viruses. They are selling arms through the back doors to Iran as the war goes on in the Middle East. They have made every effort to blackmail us in terms during the COVID crisis, which they created and they hid from us, of denying us and threatening us with respect to pharmaceuticals. These are not our friends. They are not just adversaries. They are a material threat to survival of the United States. So I'm all for trade deals, but please keep your eye on the ball, Mr. President. Do not make deals at the expense of the larger national security issues of this country. Eric, first you, then Jesse.
Yeah, so I very much, Richard, agree with your analysis. I mean, in order to assess whether or not this was a successful trip by any means, we have to first determine what China is. Are they an enemy or are they a competitor? And I agree with your conclusion that they were an enemy. They want to be the dominant superpower in the world. They want to replace the United States. They are fighting tooth and nail to end the American-led world order, and that is being played out in Ukraine, between Russia and Ukraine, and between Iran and in the Middle East, Iran, Israel, and the United States in the Middle East. So the axis of China, China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran, these revanchist powers, they're interested in displacing the United States and the American-led world order with the Chinese and the tyrannical-led world order. And I think that we have to go in open eyes to any meeting that the president has with President Xi. And I agree with that 100%. Now, the fact that they're an enemy doesn't mean we have to have a shooting war. I mean, Reagan brought down the Soviet Union without firing a shot. But the primary difference between the Soviet Union is that the economy of the Soviet Union ran in a parallel universe to the rest of the world. China is wholly integrated into the global economy. That's what makes China that much more difficult and more dangerous. They have the wherewithal to impose their will on other people's economies. I mean, similarly, we're the biggest gorilla of all, and of course we have the greatest leverage, and that is Trump's approach when he comes into any of these meetings. America's the most powerful. They need access to our markets. I can have my way with them. We can make a deal. Now, the two concerns I had of the president going to China during this trip, and Richard, you mentioned one of them, and that is Taiwan. The idea that there was going to be some change in American policy vis-a-vis Taiwan. And to your point, the Chinese issued a statement saying, quote, President Xi stressed to President Trump that the Taiwan question is the most important issue in China-U.S. relations. If it is handled properly, the bilateral relationship will enjoy overall stability. Otherwise, the two countries will have clashes and even conflicts, putting the entire relationship in great jeopardy. Taiwan independence and cross-strait peace are as irreconcilable as fire and water. So what the Chinese are saying in that statement, what Xi is trying to communicate in that statement is, give us Taiwan or you risk war. Now, what was interesting is in response to that by Xi and the Chinese government, the United States issued no statement vis-a-vis Taiwan. And later on in the day, in a press conference, Secretary of State and Chief Cook and Bottle Washer Marco Rubio said there's no change in American policy vis-a-vis Taiwan, which means this intentional ambiguity regarding how the United States views Taiwan. Would we defend it? Do we think it's independent? Do we recognize Chinese sovereignty over it? We're just completely silent on it, leaving the Chinese to wonder if they were to attack, would we defend them? Now, beyond just the chips, Richard, what is critically important about Taiwan is the Taiwan Straits. There's about 120 miles between China and Taiwan. And through those Taiwan Straits, some disproportionate share of international commercial shipping goes through that. So if you think closing down the Strait of Hormuz would wreaks havoc on the world economy, just allow the Chinese to shut down the Strait of Taiwan. Then the commercial shipping comes to a grinding halt. They could destroy our economy. We can't give them that kind of leverage. That's another reason why Taiwan and defending Taiwan is so critically important. The other issue I was concerned about, and my fears seem to have been allayed, again by Secretary of State Rubio, was would President Trump seek Chinese help ending the war with Iran? Trump, to his credit, said they offered, I didn't ask, and Marco Rubio, on top of that, not only didn't we ask, we don't need it. We do this ourselves. And that's critically important because if you get Chinese help in ending the war with Iran, something we can do ourselves, you have to give something to get something. And what is that something they would want? And then that comes back again to Taiwan. Now, Richard, you mentioned the slowdown in weapons sales to Taiwan. I had not heard that. I agree with you. I hope it is not true. I happen to be of a mind that if they were to attack Taiwan, we should defend Taiwan, and we can't get enough weapons there quickly enough. We should also keep in mind that Taiwan is a very mountainous country, and unlike the Strait of Hormuz, which is a few miles wide, Strait of Taiwan is 120 miles wide approximately. That would be a heavy lift for China. There'd be a lot of casualties, and there's no guarantee they would win. So that's what holds them at bay, and hopefully there'll be no change in American policy vis-a-vis Taiwan. Now, to me, what was most interesting about the discussions, you'll remember whenever we had summits between the American presidents and Soviet leaders, the big topic was arms control, nuclear disarmament and arms control. You don't have any of that. There's no discussion of that whatsoever, at least that we've heard of in any of the printouts from these meetings. President Trump, to his credit, originally dropped out of the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty with Russia in 2019 during his first administration because Russia cheated, and it didn't include China. So all we would succeed in doing in having any sort of disarmament and arms control talks is we would disarm, Russia would cheat and build a military, and China wouldn't be bound by them, and they can do whatever they want.
And by the way, in China's history is they'll make a commitment and then renege on it.
Well, it may be true, but it's even easier to do it if you don't make any commitment, and that's what we were finding when we would have these bilateral talks. Now, Joe Biden, imbecile that he was, and his administration, as incompetent was, went back into the agreement, and now we're getting back out of the agreement. So to the extent we're going to have any sort of arms control discussions or disarmament discussions, it has to be trilateral between Russia, China, and ourselves. So I hand it to the Trump administration not to get sucked down that rabbit hole by having discussions with Russia, which didn't include China. But it was interesting to me that if you put together, because of China's full integration into the global economy and no disarmament talks, the leverage that Trump has, the economy, are these economic talks, are these deals. So I think he sees it in that vein. If he's not going to be able to reach these disarmament talks, how do we reach some sort of accommodation in China so there's not a shooting war? How do we advance American national security interests? And I think he sees it as the only way to really do that is through these negotiations. But he shows up with incredible leverage. And I have every confidence that he used them. We'll find out more as time goes on. But we've seen some of it. First, the United States is the largest economy in the world by far. It's the most powerful. It's the most resilient. There's not even China's second, but it's not a close second. So that's one thing we certainly have in our favor. Now, one of the things that China has, of course, is they have a disproportionate share, roughly 70% of the globe's rare earth minerals. But what has Donald Trump been doing in the meantime leading up to this? Overthrowing Maduro was critically important, not just to overthrow a dictator that terrorized his own people and was a narco-terrorist and killed thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of Americans with drugs. Venezuela is also one of the wealthiest and oil-rich countries in the world. So now that we are there and that oil is being sold to us, and we are controlling to whom the Venezuelans sell, that gives us tremendous leverage over China, which is oil and fossil fuel poor. They have to be importing all this stuff. That's why when China says that it has an interest in opening the Strait of Hormuz, of course it does, because it needs the oil that Iran ships.
And they need to export as well. Their products, they're an exporting nation.
100%. So they need the Strait of Hormuz open, not because they care about us, but because they care about themselves.
Of course.
So that's why it is so critically important, and that is why it's such a strategic piece of genius that the United States is controlling oil from Venezuela. The United States is the largest oil producer, natural gas producer in the world. The UAE has completely now aligned itself with the United States and Israel. It is withdrawn from OPEC. So OPEC is now effectively neutered, and it gives the United States that much more power over the price of oil and to whom the oil is sold. That was Trump's leverage. But it remains to be seen how that leverage is used and what deals were met and what deals were made. And the final point I would make is, regardless of what kind of détente or relationship you want to have with China, because the conclusion is that they are an enemy, there are certain aspects of the economy that must be completely taken out of the supply chain from China. China has to be completely removed. And those are in particular the military, pharmaceuticals, and any technology. No, they want to sell us toys and Legos. God bless them. They can sell us all the made in China toys and sneakers they want. But if we need certain minerals or we need certain components that go into our jet fighters and our Navy ships and our night goggles, China cannot be in that supply chain. If we need pharmaceuticals to save lives, to fight cancer, to do open heart surgery, China cannot be in the supply chain. And in the AI war, I don't care what any of these states say. They want to get out of AI, or people think that AI is bad. You may think it's bad, but it's the future. And if we don't exploit it, the Chinese are going to exploit it. So we better take advantage of it, and we better be first. So any technology that exists that we rely on any other nation for, China has to be taken out of that supply chain.
All right, talking about the future, I have to give some time to our esteemed colleague and co-host, Jesse Garcia. Jesse.
Thank you so much. I think that you and Eric have really I think you and Eric covered that, and I do agree a lot with Eric. I think
What about me? What about me? Jesus.
Well, you thought that it was a complete failure. With me. I don't agree that it was a complete failure. First and foremost, let me just go through this issue. I think that to speak of the battleground right now is not a shooting war. It's either cybersecurity or it's on the paramount is economically. And I think it was a great show of force. And the great show of force, I believe, came in multiple platforms. Number one, it came with the fact that directly with the president came 20 of the biggest CEOs of the global economy, those based in the United States, where we were speaking as one, markets as one market going forth that not only is the American market, but a market that reaches into a global sphere. Number two, carrying forward with this show of force in Beijing with the president was the fact of the successes the United States military has had in Iran, in its partnership with Israel, in eliminating the Hezbollah and the Hamas as much as possible, and especially in light of what happened in October 7th of 2022. The third thing here is also the precision of our American military. Let's go to Midnight Hammer, how those, in secrecy, those B-2 bombers crisscrossed the globe and dropped and eliminated the nuclear facilities of Iran. Subsequently to that, the elimination of Maduro with special forces. So in that room, our President Trump was carrying two major shows of force: economic, our markets, his CEOs from the United States that have global reach, and also the American military. Because as we have spoken here for almost 4 years of the Ukraine war that has been going on, the Russian-Ukraine war, the one benefactor of that war has been China, because they have watched not just the United States, but predominantly the United States actions, but they have watched the global response to that war. That all changed on January 20th of 2025, when President Trump took a more aggressive peace through strength philosophy to the global stage, and America now stands tall as the global leader, both economically and militarily. As it comes to Taiwan, I think that Eric touched upon this too. The fact that Trump was there with one mission, and he was going to speak to the points that he wanted to do, but he also had Marco Rubio lay out very clearly, the U.S. policy on the issue of Taiwan. This is a quote: is unchanged as of today, and as of the meeting that we have had here this morning. Rubio went on to say, we always make clear our position and we move on to the other topics. Taiwan, for my entire existence, will have always been issue number one, issue number 1A, issue number 1B when it comes to the China-United States relationship. It's my, in fact, if you guys will correct me, we still have, as an official policy, a one China policy in the United States. However, we have been supporting the republic and the democracy in Taiwan. I believe that it would have been, I am truly believe that Trump to announce immediately after taking off of China, Beijing, that the arms sales to Taiwan would have not been good form. It would not have been. But I find solace in the fact that he did have his number one guy, the jack of all trades, Marco Rubio, clearly and succinctly lay out the United States policy. It didn't have to be written. It came right from the top diplomat of the United States. And thirdly, I think that in the gaggle on Air Force One, President Trump did bring up denuclearization. And in fact, I'll quote in part of the gaggle, he said, "We brought it up, denuclearization. I talk about it all the time with Russia and China." And it did come up. We did discuss that. I got a very positive response at the beginning, he added, but did not provide details on what he discussed. And I think that this president, as very open and transparent, and the use of public relations, both social media and the mainstream media and other alternative medias, is also someone that holds his cards very close to the vest. He does not let his enemies, his competitors, or even his allies know where he's coming from at any given time. Not like Obama, who continued to move the red line in the Middle East, and certainly not like Biden, who retracted the United States from a position of prominence and leadership on the global stage.
Very well said. We have to take a break, gentlemen. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in but a few moments with more important and interesting conversation. Please stay with us.
Let the Record Show is on the air. This is Let the Record Show, using common sense. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg,
Essayist and commentator Eric Lavine,
and Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party. Jesse is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Republican Party in Suffolk County. With us is our co-host, good friend, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Lavine. And I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, gentlemen, I want to switch gears. So, I think I've made it pretty clear over the last number of years that I've cut off my subscription to the New York Times. And people say to me, why would you cut off your subscription to the New York Times? Because I'm tired of reading foolishness. I'm tired of reading propaganda. I'm trying very, very hard to keep an open mind. These people get Pulitzer Prizes for absolute intellectual garbage with no meaningful research or due diligence. And a perfect example of this, Jesse and Eric, is the article printed by Nicholas Kristof, who wrote an article and in essence said as follows, that the Israeli government has a deliberate policy of using sexual abuse and torture against Palestinians and Arabs, and made an allegation that the victims are subjected to not only rape, but rape by animals. Now, this story has now led to the state of Israel indicating that they will now sue the New York Times. So the question becomes, Jesse and Eric, why was this story out there in the first place? Why wouldn't the New York Times do real due diligence? And the timing. And the timing has everything to do with the fact that there were independent studies and reports coming out that showed very, very clearly that was a Palestinian Hamas crew who had a deliberate policy of sexual abuse, torture, rape, mutilation when they attacked the state of Israel and its citizens on October 7th. That's what it was about. It was an attempt to spread mud, disinformation, to cloud the historical record and saying, well, they do it too. That is the Israelis. So I'm absolutely outraged by this. I believe that I'd love to get Kristof on the stand, take his deposition. I would love to see the documents that support this. And I'd like to see the New York Times being held accountable. This is supposed to be the venerable gray lady, the newspaper of record. How dare they publish this blood libel, unsubstantiated, in an attempt to muddy the waters against the victims here, which is the state of Israel and its people. Eric.
Yeah, well, the New York Times history vis-a-vis Jewish issues is quite a sad one, notwithstanding that it's owned by Jews. These are self-hating, embarrassed Jews. During the Second World War, they did everything they could to help cover up the Holocaust that they knew about, but they wouldn't cover it. But, I mean, I think, Richard, as unbelievably grotesque and upsetting as you describe it, it's even worse. Let's remember who Nicholas Kristof was relying on in making these allegations. And let's be explicit in what they were. The allegation is that the Israelis trained dogs to anally penetrate prisoners. Now, by putting aside the fact that it's biologically impossible or by nature impossible for that to happen, this was an allegation that Kristof makes based on an anonymous source that's almost as credible as the blood libel that Jews kill Christian children to make matzah, which is an age-old, centuries-old anti-Semitic blood libel. But this is very much in that pattern. But some of the people say, oh, it's Nicholas Kristof. He's a Pulitzer Prize winner. So what? Yasser Arafat won the Nobel Peace Prize, founder of modern-day terrorism, a man who had dedicated his life to destroying the Jewish state of Israel. And talk about having sex with animals. It's pretty well known that Yasser Arafat and sheep had very close relationships. But then what are other prizes that people win? Barack Obama won the Nobel Prize as well.
For what? For getting elected?
Exactly, for getting elected.
Not only, well, he wasn't George W. Bush. His record.
Exactly.
He during the Arab Spring alone, he has Mubarak overthrown, replaced by President Morsi, a Muslim Brotherhood leader who is dedicated to destroying the state of Israel, and a Hamas supporter. He brings in Russia because he won't enforce his red line, sends the Syrian people into their civil war into an abyss. He prematurely withdrew from Iraq and helped create ISIS. He was the author of the JCPOA, betrayed Israel and empowered Iran, and we're at war with Iran now and fighting them with weapons that Barack Obama paid for and trying to push them back and the terror network back from attacking Israel, again, that Barack Obama paid for. He empowered Venezuela. He empowered Cuba. He didn't mind if Russia and China found their way into the Western Hemisphere, and he gave away Crimea. With a record like that, who wouldn't win the Nobel Peace Prize? So the sense that the guy won a Pulitzer Prize, it's utterly meaningless. And Richard, to your absolutely 100% on target point about why now. So this is on the eve of a report coming out, a 2-year, well-documented report through hundreds of interviews, videotapes, documents that Hamas themselves generated, showing not only did they have written documentation to prove that Hamas went in there with a plan to actually rape and mutilate women. So the whole point of releasing this now, Richard, you're 100% right, is we release this so that we can say, look, Hamas may have did something bad, but the Jews do the exact same thing. There's no difference. There's this moral equivalence. That's why we're going to release this now, to dampen down the impact of the report that's going to come out. Let's always keep in mind, of course, that Hamas baked babies alive in ovens, cut open the bellies of pregnant women, and murdered the fetus in front of the screaming mother, burned families alive and whole, killed parents in front of the children in front of the parents. And to this, there is no dispute. There is no defense. Hamas made those movies themselves. But again, this is the same old stuff. This is why we hear cries of Israel's committing genocide. Of course, it's not. But they make that charge so that originally the theory was if we deny the Holocaust ever happened, Israel doesn't have a right to exist because, of course, Israel only exists because of the Holocaust. If there was no Holocaust, who needs Israel? Well, once it was impossible to deny that the Holocaust existed, then it was, all right, yeah, the Holocaust existed, but the Jews do the exact same thing. You see, they're committing genocide against the Palestinian people. And because they're as evil as the Nazis were, they have no right to exist. This is all about delegitimizing. The New York Times has been at it for a very, very long time. And what we really need to keep in mind because we're living in extraordinarily dangerous times. And this is why I believe this is, at least for American Jews or the diaspora Jews, this is 1936 Germany. Zoran Mamdani is a vile anti-Semite who, if he could march the Jews into the ovens, he would. Let's be clear about that. He does not denounce globalizing the Intifada. He's very clear. Anytime he's asked, he does not believe the Jewish state of Israel has a right to exist. He started the chapter for Students for Justice in Palestine at Bowdoin College, which calls for the destruction of the Jewish state of Israel and the genocide against the Jews. He supports Hamas, which calls for the genocide against the Jews. And he and his wife, who puts up smiley faces and thumbs up when people text about how the Hamas is killing Jews. This is where we are. And Jews are always at their greatest risk when anti-Semitism is mainstreamed, when it becomes government policy, whether it's during the Inquisition, whether it's during the Holocaust, whether it's during the Soviet period. Whenever anti-Semitism is mainstreamed and becomes government policy, that's when Jews are at their greatest risk. And that's what we're seeing in New York, and that's what we're seeing in the Democratic Party as a whole. That is what is so frightening about the dead carcass of the Democratic Party being filled by the DSA, the Democratic Socialists. They are a vile bunch of anti-Semites. I encourage people, if they haven't done it, go online, read the policy positions of the DSA about Jews and about Israel and about these accusations, these false accusations of genocide and colonial occupying apartheid powers. It's all garbage, but it's there, and it's there to incite anti-Semitism. And unfortunately, it really appears that there are two kinds of Democrats. Removing John Fetterman from this, because he's a profile in courage. One kind of Democrat is the true believer, true anti-Semite. And the rest, led by Chuck Schumer, are the gutless ones who are afraid to stand up to them. And the Nicholas Kristof article in the New York Times publishing the article is all part and parcel of trying to delegitimize the Jewish state of Israel and feeding into these age-old blood libels about Jews and mainstreaming anti-Semitism. That's what makes Nicholas Kristof's article, aside from the fact that it just defies belief and it's not journalism, it's just some hate screed. That's what makes it so dangerous.
Jesse.
I would love to say that I'm surprised by the New York Times. I am surprised that they let this vile piece of garbage be printed on their sheets. But I'm not, because it almost has seemed that over time, anti-Semites and Hamas itself may have taken over the editorial guidance of the New York Times and many of it in our mainstream media. This goes beyond the word disgusting, beyond the word of erroneous, beyond the word of incomprehensible, and I just don't understand this. And despite the fierce condemnations from Israel, which should and must bring this libel case to our American courts and to the courts of public opinion, they must do this to correct the record, because left to the internal debates inside the newsrooms of the New York Times and others, and the fact that they will, even that when you have a former Prime Minister, Omar, who stated very clearly that he was misquoted for this opinion piece, they have not only doubled down, they have refused to retract this piece, but they have actually doubled down on it. This is nothing more than hate speech. It has no place in our society from here. For the fact that something as revered at one point as the New York Times should give this a platform, this is like when you have Democrats and the far left or the mainstream media that attacks Republicans says that whenever an ultra conservative is given a platform and to speak. I have spoken out about those neo-Nazis and they should never be given a platform to speak on podcasts, on radio, on television, or in the pages of our newspapers. They should not be given that opportunity or that platform, as well as this. I don't care if he is at one point a Pulitzer Prize winning writer. This is nothing more than hate speech. It's erroneous and something that is just simply disgusting.
Well, I'll tell you what troubles me, and then we have to take the break, Jesse and Eric. What troubles me is, where's the voice of the so-called decent Democrats? Where is anybody in the Democratic Party speaking out against this worldwide surge of anti-Semitism? Where are the people in the United States of America speaking out against this surge of hate speech against the American Jewish community and the state of Israel? You don't hear it. You don't see it. To Eric's point, the only person that in the Democratic Party that I see speaking out in the Senate is Fetterman, and you have maybe a couple in the House. I think Gottheimer, the congressman from New Jersey. But for God's sakes, don't they understand that when they do this, they're dehumanizing people, and when they're dehumanizing people, they're setting it up for violent attacks. The number of violent attacks worldwide and across the country against people just because they're Jews is escalated to astounding, frightening proportions. Is there no safe...
This will be Chuck Schumer's legacy, because there's no person more important to speak out, stand up and speak out against this than the leader of the Democratic Senate, than Chuck Schumer. And that weasel, that coward, that quisling, that morally bankrupt human being is silent. In the face of the most vile anti-Semitic allegations, that coward is silent.
Well, we're going to have to go silent for a moment because it's time for a break. This is Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We'll be back in about a few moments for our final segment of this week's show and for more important and interesting conversation amongst the three of us. Please stay tuned.
This is Let the Record Show. This is Let the Record Show. Now, here are your hosts, Judge Richard Weinberg,
Essayist and commentator Eric Lavine,
and Suffolk County Republican Committee Chairman Jesse Garcia.
Welcome back to Let the Record Show with Jesse Garcia, who is the Vice Chair of the New York State Republican Party and the County Chair of the Suffolk County Party, Eric Lavine, noted attorney, commentator, and essayist, and I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. So, once upon a time, we had a candidate for the presidency of the United States, previously United States Senator from California, and previously an Attorney General from California and DA of San Francisco. And her name is Kamala Harris. Now, for those of you who want to bother remembering her, because she really should be in the dustpan of history, because she's got to be one of the worst candidates ever, one of the least qualified human beings ever to hold major offices. She comes out in an attempt to resurrect her career and political viability and says, it's time to talk about crazy ideas. Let me say that again. It's time to talk about crazy ideas. And to her credit, she came up with a lot of crazy ideas, Jesse and Eric. So, for example, she wants to abolish the Electoral College. She wants to pack the Supreme Court. She wants to make Puerto Rico and District of Columbia states. She wants to do everything that subverts checks and balances, the constitutional order that has gotten to us to almost 250 years of a republic that has worked. Has it been perfect? No. Did we fight a civil war? Yes. Have we had a period of crisis and problems? Of course. But we've done it in a legitimate, reasonable way, under the rule of law, with respect to our institutions. What she's fundamentally saying is, I don't like the institutions because I can't get my political agenda and my positions in play. So she's all for, quote, democracy, but only, and systems, but only when they work to her advantage. When they don't work to her advantage, and out of the radical left, what does she do? Destroy them all. She put in a state of chaos. Do you really want to eliminate the Electoral College? Then you'll have, 10 or 12 blue states through population, control the destiny of everybody else in this country. What a great idea. Do you really want to have a Supreme Court where you're constantly packing it and adding more and more members because you don't get a result? So how do you get an honest legal read of the Constitution of the United States? Do you really want to put in a system where Puerto Rico and District of Columbia get statehood, and you now are packing it with 4 additional United States senators, so the Democrats will forever control the United States Senate? Eric.
So, channeling my inner Kamala, let me say this about that. I think I could see what I saw and think what I thought because I was thinking as I was seeing. And then I saw what I thought I was seeing, and I think I thought that I saw. And the idea, you know what I mean, was really a thought, and it was a great idea. And I had that thought, and I told you that thought. And as I think about it, I didn't really see what I saw because I forgot what I thought. And I'm thinking I should think more great things. Vote for me. The end.
That's great. Absolutely great. You have anything to add to that, or does that speak for itself?
I think it kind of speaks for itself, but I think it sums up the conclusion that the woman's an imbecile.
Well, and just think that she was the nominee of one of our 2 great parties, and then she got an even bigger imbecile to run as her vice presidential candidate, the absolutely intellectually bankrupt, morally corrupt, legally suspect governor of Minnesota, who rubber-stamped and ignored one of the great frauds in American history, the Somalia fraud against our Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security system in the billions of dollars, and looked the other way, along with the Attorney General of that state. So that was the ticket that they wanted to impose on the people of the United States. 2 of the biggest fools who have no sense of responsibility, no competence, no values that make for the sustaining of this great republic, Harris and Walsh.
I think that just demonstrates, Richard, what a bigot you are because you pointed that out. I think.
Thank you. Jesse, rally to my defense, please.
I'm rallying to the fact that Kamala Harris is an idiot, and she's just dumb in general. Honestly, if there's one stretch, if you want to give her one strand of what she was thinking, and God knows no one can understand what goes on in between those 2 ears, is that what you're seeing is the continuing salvos of her stepping into the 2028 presidential primary. That's what she's doing right now. And the definition of winning that primary is who can be the bigger idiot and who can give more free stuff away at the expense of taxpayers' money. That's what the Democratic Party is. I'm going to take exception to judge to what you said. I mean, I hate doing this with you. There are no 2 great political parties in the country. There's one. It's a Republican Party. Shortly after is the Conservative Party. The Democrat Party, as we knew it, does not exist. It is run by Democratic socialists and progressives that all they want to do is to destroy our relationship and the existence of Israel and to use our taxpayer money, hard-earned monies of people on Main Street and hardworking families, and give it to illegal aliens and illegal criminals, and so that they can have a bunch of free grocery stores, free bus rides, and they can buy their way into elections in urban centers.
Well, to that point, Jesse, that's a great segue, because I want to ask you the following, Jesse. AOC, she is a radical intellectual, lightweight, and she's foolish and dangerous ideas that she possesses. This is a woman who believes that so-called billionaires don't earn their money. They do it by exploiting other people, which shows a colossal ignorance of the capitalist system, who gets rewarded and who fails in the capitalist system, and the ability of the capitalist system to provide goods and services and elevate the quality of life for everyone. And I just don't get it. She wants to have government control everything, and when government controls everything, they fail what they try to do, and they want to redistribute hard-earned wealth created by people who give back to the community, whether it's charities, cultural institutions, educational institutions, scientific or medical research. Jesse, your thoughts?
Well, it's true. I mean, this is the continuation of the Kamala Harris type of candidacy and the way of governance. This is the way of Mandami. These are individuals that truly have no idea what's going on. They are the new breed of Democrat socialists. It's government by soundbite. It's government by viral video on social media. There is no substance to any of this. It's that they're going to say and do whatever they can for one thing. That is the accumulation of power, influence, and their own personal greed. I have not seen it recently, but I would love to see the way that the amount or the percentage that AOC's personal wealth has grown in the years that she's served in Congress, like those of her other squad members, like Omar from Minnesota, to see how they have made it a enterprise, a private enterprise of success monetarily for themselves while their constituencies suffer. Let's say if you walk through AOC's district, what you're going to see are burnt down buildings, you're going to see closed down businesses, and you're going to see a bunch of hookers, illegal aliens, and drug dealers. That's the type of community, and homeless. That's what she is. That is what the type of representation she is bringing to her district. And I have to tell you, just like as a political leader, just like in 2016 and in 2020 and in 2024, I hoped that Bernie Sanders was going to be the standard bearer, presidential candidate for the Democratic Party. I hope that AOC is one of the presidential candidates and is successful either on the ballot, because there before the American people, we will put the difference between the Republican candidate that believes in self-determination, freedom, liberty, the ability to rise up from whatever system or community you may live to be successful and achieve the American dream, as opposed to these corrupt individuals that have no substance and only care about their personal greed, influencing power.
Eric.
Jesse, you don't know what you're talking about. Your family's from Cuba. They don't know from America. What are you talking about?
Yeah, what would you know about communism?
And we left.
What would you know about liberty and free markets and capitalism, what they do? Your family could have lived the joy of communism. You chose to leave.
The joy of collectivism. I feel warmer in this studio right now. Just thinking about the joy and the warmth of collectivism.
It'd be more spectacular. What amazes me, particularly on the Democratic side, you have a bunch of people that have never run a business, never met a payroll, never took an economics class, and are a bunch of financial imbeciles deciding how the American economy should work. It's just unbelievable to me.
Speaking about idiocy, gentlemen, how do you like...
He just described Mandami.
Right. Well, no, hold on. I want to broaden the discussion.
Don't get me wound up again.
Well, hold on. I want to broaden the discussion. You said Mandami. I want to add Hochul. Hochul is just sold out during the negotiations with Mandami in terms of the state budget. And what do they want to do? They want to have wealth taxes. They want to have a so-called pied-à-terre tax for people who don't have their primary residence. They took the number down, gentlemen, from $5 million price down to $1 million. That means anybody who has a co-op or a condo or a single-family home is close to that $1 million. And then if you want to make a purchase and you want to pay cash rather than getting a mortgage, you're going to have to pay a 2% surcharge on that. How's that going to help? Jesse?
Well, it doesn't. What this tells me, number one, it's a complete shenanigan and just an abuse of financial negligence of financial distribution of funds and taxpayer monies. But what I want to speak to, and I'll let Eric speak to more of the issues in terms of the economy, but the political nature here. We are now sitting 6 weeks away from primary day here in the state of New York. Governor Hochul has no primary challenger. She's got a clear field right through November. The fact that she is still kowtowing to the Mandamis of the world, to New York City's Democratic Socialist hierarchy, is indicative that she is so concerned about her numbers internally that she needs to make sure that this base is with her. Because originally, Her endorsement of Mondami was to avoid a primary. Her endorsement of her $1.5 billion initial bailout to him was, again, to avoid a primary, because that's what this is all about. Now the fact, though, is that even in her budget, she continues to double down, if not quadruple down, with a package of about $4 billion of taxpayer monies from Long Island, from Westchester, from upstate New York, to fund the failed policies of New York City. For me, as an observer of politics, numbers and polling and candidacies and campaigns, this tells me that this race for governor between Bruce Blakeman, the Republican conservative candidate, and Kathy Hochul was a lot closer than the Siena poll will let you believe, or these public polls will let you believe, that this is a lot closer, and that Kathy Hochul is doing everything possible to make sure she shores up the long-term support through November of her base.
Eric, final thoughts.
Yeah, no, I agree with 100% of what Jesse just said. I think that analysis is spot on. The woman, Jesse, I think you'll know better than I think the number she needs is 65% of the 5-borough vote in order to carry the state. So she desperately needs Mamdani. And what this is really the canary in the coal mine. The people should be asking yourself, if she's making these concessions before the election, what does she promise to do after the election? I mean, the tax rates are going to go sky high, but people should keep in mind the minimum rate, 30%, 50%, 60%, it's zero. That's the minimum rate, because people are going to vote with their feet. People who can afford to leave, which are the people that they're taxing and abusing and bad-mouthing, are going to pick up and leave. And if you think people are going to leave because of these taxes, this inheritance tax that they're talking about, bringing it down to $500,000 and something like 50 or 60% of what you leave to your survivors will be taken by the state. Basically, you have worked all your life just to give it away to New York State. People are not going to stay for that. Anyone who has any degree of wealth is just going to pick up and leave. They're not going to die in New York.
But it's not even what, they use the word wealth. That's middle class. You own a home. You own an apartment.
That is middle class.
Well, that's it. For who believe that private property is a crime, who people believe that private property should be outlawed and that government should own the means of production, the communists, the middle class has no right to exist. It should all be flattened out. Everybody should be equally poor. It's not a matter of gradations of wealth. Everybody should be equally poor.
Much more fair, comrades. Much more fair.
Oh, well, yeah, well, it's all about social justice, baby.
Well, gentlemen.
Justice for this and justice for that.
I have to redistribute our time here on WABC back to the booth. This has been Let the Record Show with Chairman Jesse Garcia of the Republican Party, noted attorney, commentator, essayist Eric Lavine. I'm Judge Richard Weinberg. We want to thank you for listening to us once again. We look forward to being with you again next week. And as always, God bless you, God bless your families, and God bless America. Thank you for listening.